The pen hesitated above the page. Not shaking, not nervous, just paused. Kayla smiled. The kind of smile people wear when they think they've already won. The lawyer cleared his throat. Once, then looked away. Terrence didn't move. Didn't blink. Sign here, the lawyer said. Kayla laughed softly as she signed. Fast, confident, like someone stepping over a finish line. The last signature landed. The room went silent. Kayla looked up. Her smile stayed, but her eyes didn't. Something was wrong. She flipped the page back. Once, then again. Her breathing changed. Sharp, controlled, forced. Wait, she said. Terrence finally smiled. Not a grin, not satisfaction, just relief. Like a man closing a file he'd been working on for years. Kayla had just invested every dollar she ever stole into a company designed to erase her. To understand how she destroyed herself in one signature, you have to see how the trap was built, because she had signed away everything she had ever stolen, and there was no going back. If you ever trusted someone completely, only to realize later that you were being watched the entire time, you might understand what comes next. Stay with this. It gets colder. 3 months earlier, Terrence stood in his private office in London, looking out over the Thames. The city stretched gray and endless beneath a low sky that threatened rain, but never delivered. He was 42 years old, built like someone who had played rugby once and never entirely stopped training. His suits were tailored in Milan. His watches were Swiss. His voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. He had built his logistics empire from a single shipping contract in Lagos 15 years ago. Now his company moved goods across 4 continents. Oil, electronics, pharmaceuticals, rare minerals, medical supplies, luxury goods. He employed over 2,000 people. His net worth had crossed 300 million 2 years ago, and he was about to lose everything. Not because of bad strategy, not because of market collapse, not because of poor timing or bad luck, because of the woman he was going to marry. Kayla was 36, elegant, sharp, the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of billionaires and make every man feel like he was the only one she was interested in. She had degrees from universities Terrence couldn't verify. She spoke 4 languages fluently, 5 if you counted the financial dialect she used with accountants and fund managers. She wore Saint Laurent and Chanel like armor. Her laugh was controlled, her eye contact precise, her touch strategic. She knew when to lean in, when to pull back, when to ask a question that made a man feel intelligent, when to stay silent and let him fill the space with confessions. They had met at a private auction in Monaco 2 years ago. She had been standing near a Rothko painting, glass of champagne in hand, looking bored. The auction was for wealthy collectors. Art, wine, a first edition Hemingway manuscript. Terrence had been invited by a client. He didn't care about art, but he cared about relationships. He approached Kayla because she was the only person in the room who wasn't trying to be seen. They talked about logistics, supply chains, infrastructure. She knew more than she should have. She mentioned ports in Mombasa, rail delays in Tanzania, customs bottlenecks in South Africa. That should have been the first warning. But Terrence was human. And humans make mistakes when someone looks at them the way Kayla looked at him, like he was the most interesting man in the world, like she had been waiting for him. They were engaged within 18 months. The proposal happened in Santorini. Sunset over the caldera, a private villa, a ring that cost more than most people earned in 5 years. Kayla cried when he asked. Real tears, or so it seemed. She said yes before he finished the question. The wedding was set for December in Cape Town. A private ceremony on a vineyard estate. 200 guests. A reception overlooking the ocean. Kayla had planned everything. The flowers, the music, the seating chart. She spent weeks selecting the right champagne, the right caterer, the right photographer. She was meticulous. Everything was perfect until Terrence received an encrypted message that was never meant for him. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. A forwarded email from one of his IT contractors. The contractor thought it was spam. He flagged it just in case. Terrence was in his office, reviewing contract for a shipping route through the Suez Canal. He opened the email. It was a thread, coded language, financial terms, dates, account numbers, references to the target, references to extraction timeline, references to final phase, and at the bottom, a name, Kayla's, not her full name, just her first name, and a reference number, KM047. Terrence read it twice. His hands didn't shake. His expression didn't change. He simply closed the email, stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the city for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made a single call to a forensic accountant in Zurich he had used once before, years ago, during a hostile acquisition. A man named Gregor, Swiss, mid-50s, ex-intelligence. The kind of man who could find money hidden in places governments couldn't reach. Gregor answered on the second ring. Terrence explained what he had found. Gregor said he would look into it. How deep do you want me to go? Gregor asked. All the way, Terrence said. The accountant called back 3 days later. You need to sit down for this, Gregor said. Terrence was already sitting. Go ahead. Kayla was a professional, not in the way she claimed. Not a consultant, not a strategist, not an executive, a grifter. She had been moving through wealthy circles for over a decade. Different names, different cities, always the same method. Get close, gain trust, extract value, disappear. Gregor had traced her back to 2011, possibly earlier, but the trail went cold before that. She had taken a venture capitalist in Singapore for $2 million, convinced him to invest in a blockchain startup that never existed. The man lost everything. His marriage, his reputation. He never reported it. A hedge fund manager in New York for $3 million drained his private accounts while he was going through a divorce. She posed as a wealth advisor. By the time he noticed, she was gone. A shipping magnate in Athens for nearly $5 million. Sold a competitor list to a rival and vanished before the lawsuit started. The man died of a heart attack 6 months later. Stress, they said. She had been caught once. In Geneva, but the charges were dropped. Insufficient evidence. The man she had targeted didn't want the publicity. He paid her to disappear quietly. She was good, very good, and Terrence had been her biggest target yet. Over 2 years, she had quietly siphoned funds from offshore accounts he didn't monitor closely. Shell companies, investment vehicles, accounts registered in the Caymans and Singapore that moved money for tax efficiency. She had copied trade secrets, supplier lists, contract terms, route maps, client databases. She had photographed documents, recorded conversations, forwarded emails to encrypted servers, and she had fed them to Victor Chun. Chun was Terrence's largest competitor, a Taiwanese billionaire who had been trying to squeeze Terrence out of East African markets for years. Chun had been winning because Kayla was helping him. The forensic accountant estimated she had taken $9 million directly. The leaked intelligence had cost Terrence another $20 million in lost contracts, shipments diverted, clients stolen, bids undercut. Chun had expanded into Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, markets Terrence had spent years cultivating, and she wasn't done. Her exit plan was elegant. She had convinced Terrence to invest in a new venture, a logistics platform for African startups. High risk, high reward, designed to connect small businesses with international supply chains. It was a beautiful idea, progressive, impactful, the kind of thing that looked good in press releases. Terrence had agreed. He trusted her. She had been steering him toward it for months. Gentle suggestions, market research, enthusiasm, articles she sent him about emerging markets, conversations over dinner about opportunity and growth. She even introduced him to consultants, analysts, people who reinforced her narrative, people she had paid. The plan was simple. Once the investment was live and his liquidity was stretched, she would trigger a coordinated collapse. Bad press, supplier withdrawals, regulatory complaints, anonymous reports to financial authorities. The venture would fail. Terrence would be financially broken, his reputation damaged, his empire vulnerable, and Kayla would vanish with everything. The wedding was just theater. She was never going to show up. She had a flight booked to Buenos Aires for the day before the ceremony. A new identity waiting. Accounts in 3 countries. A villa in Mendoza already purchased under a shell company. She had done this before. She would do it again. Terrence sat in his office for a long time after Gregor hung up. He didn't move. He didn't call anyone. He didn't throw anything. He didn't curse. He didn't break down. He just thought. Most men would have confronted her, called the police, frozen her accounts, ended it loudly. Most men would have wanted blood. Terrence was not most men. He had built an empire by reading people, by staying 3 moves ahead, by never reacting emotionally when cold logic would win. by understanding that the loudest response is rarely the most effective. And somewhere in that silence, sitting in his office overlooking the Thames, Terrence made a decision. He realized something fundamental, something that would shape everything that followed. Humiliation is always more effective than confrontation. Silence cuts deeper than exposure, because when you confront someone, you give them a story to tell, a villain to blame, a narrative where they're the victim. But when you let them destroy themselves, they have no one to blame but their own arrogance. And that, Terrence understood, was the only revenge worth taking. And Kayla had made one critical mistake. She assumed he was in love. He had been. Once. Maybe. There had been nights when he believed it. Moments when he imagined a future with her. Children. A home. Something beyond work and travel. And endless negotiations. But not anymore. Now he was just interested in how far she would go, how deep the deception ran, how confident she really was. He spent the next 2 weeks building something new, a company, a shell, a perfect trap. He called it Vanguard Capital Ventures, registered in the Cayman Islands, backed by fabricated investor profiles and falsified asset reports that would pass surface-level scrutiny but collapse under deep investigation. On paper, it was a high-yield private equity fund focused on African infrastructure, roads, ports, energy grids. In reality, it was a black hole. Every clause, every term, every signature requirement, designed to absorb capital and lock it permanently behind legal walls that would take years to penetrate. Walls built from jurisdictional complexity, arbitration clauses, and liability waivers that made recovery functionally impossible. And the fund required one thing to activate: consolidated investor commitment, meaning anyone who put money in had to move all related assets into the funds, holding structure first. For protection, of course. For security. For maximum returns. Greger helped design the structure. He had done this kind of work before. Corporate espionage countermeasures. Asset protection schemes. Financial traps for hostile actors. You're sure about this? Greger asked during one of their calls. Completely, Terrence said. It's legal. Barely. But legal. That's all I need. Terrence hired a law firm in Dubai, not his usual firm, a boutique practice specializing in international finance. 3 lawyers who asked no questions and billed by the hour. He gave them the structure. They built the paperwork. Airtight, irreversible, legal. One of the lawyers, a British man named Hartford, reviewed the documents carefully. This is aggressive, Hartford said. Is it enforceable? Terrence asked. Absolutely. Then we proceed. Hartford nodded slowly. He had seen worse. Much worse. Who's the target? Someone who won't fight back, Terrence said, and that was the end of the conversation. Then he invited Kayla to Dubai. He told her he wanted to finalize the African venture investment. He wanted her advice, her insight, her expertise. He told her he was nervous about the scale of the commitment. He told her he trusted her more than anyone. She agreed immediately. She thought she was guiding him into the final trap. She had no idea she was walking into hers. They stayed at the Burj Al Arab, separate suites at her request. She said she wanted to keep some mystery before the wedding, to savor the anticipation. He didn't argue. Her suite was on the 25th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, a private terrace, a view of the Gulf that stretched to the horizon. She spent the first night celebrating alone. Champagne, a bath, a video call with someone Terrence couldn't identify. She was confident, almost giddy. During the day, they met with lawyers, accountants, advisors. They reviewed contracts, discussed projections, analyzed market conditions. Terrence played his role perfectly. He asked her opinion on everything. He deferred to her expertise. He seemed nervous, uncertain. He questioned his own decisions. He hesitated before signing preliminary documents. He asked her to review clauses he claimed not to understand. She loved it. She felt powerful, in control, close to the finish line. Every night, she returned to her suite and sent encrypted updates to Victor Chun. She told him Terrence was vulnerable, stretched thin, that the investment was nearly locked, that it was almost over, that in 2 weeks, Terrence would be ruined, and she would be gone. Chun responded with encouragement, promised her a bonus once Terrence's company collapsed, offered her a position in his own organization. She believed him. On the 4th day, Terrence introduced her to Vanguard Capital Ventures, They were sitting in a private lounge overlooking the marina. Sunlight poured through the glass. Yachts drifted in the harbor below. He framed it as an opportunity, a side investment, something exclusive, a private equity fund managed by a group of anonymous ultra-high net worth individuals. Minimum entry, $10 million. Return projected at 18% annually. Secured by infrastructure contracts across sub-Saharan Africa. Diversified, safe, high yield, but there was a catch. To qualify, investors had to consolidate all liquid assets into the fund's secure holding structure for regulatory reasons, for compliance, for protection against market volatility. Kayla hesitated, not because she suspected anything, because she didn't want to tie up her stolen money where Terrence might see it. But Terrence was gentle, patient. He explained that her assets would be protected under her own name, separate accounts, completely private, anonymous even to him. He showed her documents, prospectuses, legal opinions. Everything looked legitimate. He even offered to invest first. $20 million, all of his remaining liquidity. He said he trusted her judgment, that if she believed in the African venture, he believed in this, that they were partners, that he wanted to build something together. She watched him sign the preliminary agreements. His hand was steady. And then she believed him. It took 3 more days. Meetings, paperwork, legal reviews, compliance checks. Kayla moved her money carefully. She routed it through accounts in Singapore, Cyprus, and the British Virgin Islands, through holding companies and trust structures designed to obscure origin and ownership. She thought she was being clever. She didn't realize every transfer was being documented, traced, logged. Gregor, the forensic accountant, was watching every transaction in real time from Zurich, building a map, a ledger, a record. He sent Terrence updates twice daily. She's moving everything, Gregor said on the 6th day. Good, Terrence replied. She's confident. Even better. By the time Kayla sat down at the glass conference table on the 7th day, she had moved everything. $9 million in stolen funds from Terrence's accounts. $3 million in payments from Victor Chun, $2 million in side investments from previous marks, $14 million total. All of it consolidated into Vanguard Capital Ventures. All of it locked behind ironclad legal terms she hadn't read closely enough. The signing took place in the late afternoon. The 3 lawyers were present, Hartford and 2 associates. Kayla arrived 15 minutes early, confident, smiling. She wore a white blazer, elegant, expensive. She looked like someone about to close the deal of a lifetime. Terrence arrived exactly on time. They sat across from each other. The champagne was opened. One of the lawyers poured glasses for everyone at the table. Kayla raised hers. She smiled. To new beginnings, she said. Terrence raised his glass. To consequences, he replied. She didn't catch it. She drank. The signing began, page by page, clause by clause. Kayla signed each document with practiced precision. Her signature was beautiful, flowing, confident. She asked no questions. She trusted the process. Halfway through, one of the lawyers, Hartford, paused. He looked at Kayla, then at the document in front of her, then at Terrence. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A hesitation, a moment of doubt. Kayla noticed. Is something wrong? She asked. Hartford cleared his throat. No, just confirming a clause reference. Section 12.4. He turned a page. Proceed. Kayla's fingers tightened slightly on her pen, just for a moment. Then she continued signing. But the confidence in her eyes had shifted. Just barely. Terrence saw it and said nothing. And then the screen lit up behind her. The numbers appeared. Red text. Withdrawal restrictions. Lock-in periods. Liquidation clauses. Kayla's smile faded slowly. She set her glass down. She turned in her chair. The screen displayed the fund's terms in full. Assets committed could not be withdrawn for a minimum of 7 years. Any attempt to dissolve the investment required unanimous board approval. The board consisted of 3 anonymous members, all of whom were controlled by Terrence. The fund's underlying assets? Worthless. Vanguard Capital Ventures owned nothing. No infrastructure. No ventures. No equity. No contracts. It was a legal ghost. A paper structure designed to hold money and never release it. And Kayla had just given it everything. Her eyes moved across the screen, line by line, clause by clause. And then she understood. Her breathing changed. Shallow. Rapid. She turned slowly in her chair. Terrence was watching her. His expression hadn't changed. One of the lawyers closed his folder. Another stood and left the room quietly. The third continued typing on his laptop, documenting the transaction. Kayla's voice came out thin, strained. What is this? Terrence didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch. Let her feel it. The champagne glass in front of her was still half full. Condensation dripped down the side. One of the ice cubes in the bucket cracked. Then he leaned forward, just slightly. You were always good at numbers, Kayla. So I imagine you've already figured it out. Her hand was still gripping her champagne glass. This isn't you can't. I can, he said. And I did. She looked at the screen again, at the red text, at the terms she had signed, at her own signature at the bottom of each page, 14 times. Her name, her consent, her mistake. This is illegal. No, Terrence said calmly. It's not. You signed voluntarily. You were advised by independent legal counsel. Everything was disclosed in the prospectus. You had 72 hours to review the documents. You chose to proceed. You lied. No, you assumed. Her breathing quickened. Victor Chun has already been contacted by regulators in Taiwan and Hong Kong. They have questions about certain financial transactions, offshore payments, intelligence purchases, corporate espionage. I imagine he'll be busy for a while. Several years, likely. Kayla stared at him. Her mind was racing, calculating, looking for an exit. There wasn't one. Terrence stood. He adjusted his cufflinks. Slowly, deliberately. You're free to leave, Kayla. The wedding is canceled, obviously. Your belongings have been moved out of my properties. Your access to my accounts has been revoked. Your name has been removed from all documents. You're welcome to pursue legal action, but I think you'll find that expensive and slow and ultimately pointless. He picked up his phone. The car is waiting downstairs. It will take you to the airport. Your flight to Singapore leaves in 3 hours. I've been told you have connections there. Kayla didn't move. She couldn't. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage, from disbelief, from the slow, creeping realization that she had been outplayed. Completely. Terrence walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, you were good. Better than most. You almost had me convinced. You just made one mistake. She looked up at him. Her eyes were red. Not from tears. From rage. From disbelief. You thought I loved you enough to be stupid. He opened the door. I didn't. And then he was gone. Kayla sat in that conference room for another 20 minutes. The lawyers had left. The champagne had gone warm. The sun had set over Dubai, and the city lights below sparkled like broken glass. She stared at the screen, at the numbers, at the lock-in period. 7 years. She would be 43 by then. She tried to think of a way out. There wasn't one. Every dollar she had taken, every payment she had received, every piece of leverage she had built over 2 years. Gone. Locked. Inaccessible. She had bankrupted herself. And the champagne bottle sat in its bucket, unopened, sweating, a monument to a celebration that would never happen. She tried to call Victor Chin. The number was disconnected. She tried to access her accounts in Singapore, frozen, Cyprus, frozen, British Virgin Islands, frozen. Gregor had contacted every bank, every jurisdiction, every financial authority that mattered, with evidence, documentation, transaction records. Kayla's accounts weren't just frozen. They were flagged, under investigation, tied to criminal inquiries in 3 countries. She couldn't touch them without triggering arrest warrants. She left Dubai on the midnight flight to Singapore, not the 3-hour flight Terrence had mentioned. She changed her ticket, tried to disappear. But Gregor was still watching, and Terrence had already informed the appropriate authorities. She landed in Singapore and was questioned for 6 hours at the airport. They didn't arrest her. They didn't have enough yet. But they took her passport, told her not to leave the country, told her they would be in touch. She stayed in a budget hotel near Changi Airport for 3 weeks, burning through what little cash she had left. Try to find someone who could help. Lawyers, fixers, former contacts. No one would touch her case. No one could. 3 weeks after Dubai, Terrence received a message from Gregor. Victor Chen's company had collapsed under regulatory pressure. His assets were frozen. his contracts voided. His business partners had fled. He was facing criminal charges in Taiwan and Hong Kong, corporate espionage, fraud, bribery, money laundering. His trial was expected to last 2 years. Kayla had vanished from Singapore. No social media, no sightings, no trail. She had slipped past authorities somehow. A boat to Indonesia, Gregor suspected, then overland to Thailand. But she was broke, completely. Gregor asked if Terrence wanted to pursue her further. Terrence said no. There was nothing left to take. Terrence returned to London. He resumed his work, expanded his company, signed new contracts in Kenya and Ethiopia. The African venture Kayla had tried to sabotage became one of his most successful projects. It created jobs, built infrastructure, changed supply routes. Within a year, it had generated $42 million in revenue. He was interviewed by Bloomberg, Forbes, the Financial Times. He never mentioned Kayla. No one asked. To the world, she had simply disappeared. 6 months later, Terrence was in Nairobi for a contract signing with the Kenyan government, a logistics hub, a partnership with local businesses, a project worth $40 million. He was sitting in a cafe near the financial district, reading through final revisions when he saw her. She was across the street, thinner, older looking, wearing clothes that didn't fit the woman she used to be. Cheap jeans, a faded blouse, hair pulled back in a careless ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry. She was handing out flyers for a timeshare company, smiling at tourists, trying to make eye contact. Desperate, her voice carried across the street. Exclusive opportunity, investment properties. The words sounded hollow. Their eyes met for just a moment. Hers widened. Recognition. Shock. Something close to fear. She looked away first, dropped the flyers, turned and walked quickly down the street. Terrence finished his coffee, paid, and left. He didn't follow her. He didn't need to. People often ask if revenge is worth it, if it brings peace, closure, satisfaction. Terrence never answered that question. He didn't need to, because revenge wasn't what he had wanted. He hadn't wanted her to suffer for the sake of suffering. He hadn't wanted to punish her out of anger or spite. He had wanted something simpler. He wanted Kayla to understand what she had tried to do to him, not theoretically, not abstractly, but completely, personally, irreversibly, and she did. The African venture she had tried to sabotage became a blueprint. Terrence expanded into 4 new countries, created 800 jobs, built infrastructure that changed supply routes across the region. He partnered with local governments, trained local workers, invested in communities. He was invited to speak at conferences, advised policymakers, shaped the future of African logistics. He never mentioned Kayla in interviews. He never told the story publicly. To the world, she simply disappeared. And that was the point. She had tried to erase him. Instead, she erased herself. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a perfect trap. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's just complete. The kind of silence that follows someone who realizes, too late, that they were never in control, that every move they made was seen, every plan anticipated, every exit closed before they even looked for it. Terrence never celebrated. He never gloated. He never told his friends, his colleagues, his family. He simply moved forward. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's not violent. It's not even visible. It's the kind of revenge that leaves someone standing in an empty room, holding a pen, staring at a contract they signed with their own hand, realizing that everything they thought they had won was always as a take back. Kayla never contacted him again. She never sued. She never tried to expose him. She never went to press. Because she knew that if she opened that door, the world would see what she really was. And Terrence would make sure of it. He had the documentation, the evidence, the transaction records, every theft, every transfer, every lie, all of it cataloged, verified, ready. So she stayed silent and disappeared into the kind of anonymity she had always inflicted on others. Terrence married eventually, 3 years later, a doctor from Accra, someone who had never heard of Kayla, someone who didn't ask about his past, someone who looked at him and saw only the present. Her name was Amma. She was kind, intelligent, grounded. She worked with Doctors Without Borders. She had seen suffering, real suffering, the kind that puts wealthy people's problems into perspective. They met at a charity event in Accra. She was giving a presentation on maternal health in rural communities. He was captivated, not by her beauty, though she was beautiful, by her clarity, her purpose, her lack of pretense. They married in a small ceremony in Ghana. 50 guests, family and close friends. No spectacle, no performance, just commitment. They had 2 children, a boy named Kofi, a girl named Abina. He never told them this story about Kayla. There was no reason to, because the story wasn't about him. It was about what happens when someone spends years building a trap for someone else and walks into a better one. 5 years after Dubai, Terrence received an email. It was sent from an anonymous account. No name, no signature. It contained a single sentence. "I'm sorry." He stared at it for a long time. Then he deleted it. He didn't respond. There was nothing to say, because apologies don't undo signatures. They don't unlock frozen accounts. They don't return stolen years. The last time Terrence thought about Kayla, really thought about her, was on a flight from Johannesburg to London. He was reading a news article about financial fraud, recovery rates, legal protections, victim compensation programs. He wondered, briefly, if she had ever tried to get the money back, if she had hired lawyers, if she had fought. Then he closed the article and realized he didn't actually care, because the money wasn't the point. The punishment wasn't the point. The point was simpler than that. She had tried to take everything from him: his money, his business, his reputation, his future. And in the end, he let her take nothing but the memory of what she had lost. Gregor, the forensic accountant, sent Terrence a final report 3 years after Dubai to Kayla's accounts had been fully liquidated by authorities in Singapore, Cyprus, and the Caymans. The funds were distributed to previous victims, people she had scammed in Athens, New York, Singapore. They received partial restitution. Not full, never full, but something. Kayla received nothing. She was placed on financial watch lists in 14 countries, banned from opening bank accounts, obtaining credit, registering businesses. She was functionally invisible to the modern financial system. A ghost. Gregor's report concluded with a single line: target neutralized. No further action required. Terrence filed the report away and never opened again. There's a particular kind of justice that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with headlines or courtrooms or public vindication. It comes quietly, in the form of a woman handing out flyers on a street in Nairobi, in the form of a frozen account, a rejected application, a closed door, in the form of silence. And that silence, Terrence had learned, was louder than any verdict. Years later, Terrence's daughter Abina asked him a question. She was 7 years old, curious, thoughtful. They were sitting on the terrace of their home in Accra, watching the sunset. "Papa," she said, "have you ever been really angry at someone?" Terrence looked at her. "Yes," he said. "What did you do?" He thought about it, about Dubai, about the conference room, about the champagne bottle that never got opened, about Kayla's face when she realized what she had done. "I let them teach themselves a lesson," he said finally. Abina frowned. "How?" "By giving them exactly what they wanted, and letting them see what it cost." She thought about that, then nodded. "That's smart, Papa." He smiled. Sometimes the smartest thing is to do nothing at all. The champagne bottle from that conference room in Dubai was never thrown away. One of the lawyers kept it. Hartford. He kept it on a shelf in his office in London. A reminder of what happens when you build the perfect trap, and someone walks into it willingly. If you stayed with this story to the end, thank you. These kinds of stories don't always end with justice. Sometimes they end with silence, with someone realizing too late that the person they underestimated was the one person they should have feared. Not because he was cruel, not because he was vengeful, but because he was patient and precise and willing to let someone destroy themselves with their own arrogance. If this one stayed with you, consider subscribing, sharing it, letting it reach someone who needs to hear it, not for revenge, but for the reminder that patience, precision, and silence are sometimes the sharpest tools of all, that the people who smile the longest aren't always the ones who win, and that the quietest exits are often the most permanent. Thank you for listening. And remember, not everyone who smiles at you is on your side, and not everyone who stays quiet has forgotten. Some people just wait, and when the moment comes, they don't raise their voice. They don't make threats. They simply let you sign your name and watch you realize what you've done. And sometimes the only sound that remains is champagne going warm in a silver bucket, an empty chair where someone used to sit, and a signature page with your name on it 14 times.